For all things outdoors, listen to the father of two, the Jesus-loving, TV show hosting, hairy true blood American redneck, Ben Cole.
And listen to the outdoor filming, chef cooking, chocolate milk drinking, John Weismuller. We are
Rooted Podcast. If you're a deer hunter, the most exciting words you can hear are the rut. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about on this episode. We're going to deep dive into it, explaining what a scrape is, what a rub is, the different phases of the rut, how estrus does affect it, and much, much more. So, Ben, tell us exactly what you think and know of a scrape to be. Let's start there for the people. What is a scrape? What does it mean?
Well, a scrape is going to be a buck, mature and not mature. Any buck is going to be scraping the ground and urinating in it to put his scent and to let other deer know, bucks and does, that he is there, that he is in the area. That's his way of saying, hey, this is my area. I pissed here. This is me. So, that is really what a scrape is. And it also is a place for a doe to urinate in the same spot. That way, the buck knows that she's ready to breed.
Exactly. So, and there's different types of scrapes, right? Like there's what we're all looking for, a predominant scrape that is maybe along like a good deer trail, a good path. That may be something that you want to set up on, because more than likely that deer is going to come back. But then there's also just some random scrapes, like you'll be just in this middle of patch of woods, there's no sign nowhere, and then there's just this scrape. And I put that to the equivalent of you're walking a dog and the dog hikes a leg on a fire hydrant, just right place, right time, and it was in the mood, so it just decided to make a scrape here. So I will say that you may want to look for scrapes that are maybe along a food source or on a trail, and odds of a deer coming back to that scrape and checking it pretty high.
I'll tell you this: most of my scrapes that are on the farm here and at the ranch, Sinking Creek Ranch, there, the hunting lodge we have. Man, most of our scrapes are happening in the woods right now. They haven't quite made it out to the fields yet. A majority of them are on the ridge tops. I haven't seen any in the ag fields yet as of yesterday. Most of them, actually, 100% of them are on the ridge tops way back in the woods, and they're all along roads, like logging roads or four-wheeler trails or whatever. But that is what they are all on, is those kind of trails through the woods.
So now, what's the difference between a rub and a scrape? Maybe for someone who's new or getting into deer hunting, and this is going to be their first rut. What is a rub?
Well, I'm going to give you my best definition, because I am not technically a master deer hunter. I'm a master deer killer, but it's because good Lord's blessed me over the years, with some good opportunities. But to me, what a rub is kind of marking their territory, but also, like in these hills that we're hunting, I wonder, is it part of a trail system, a network system for them, so they know where they're going, where they've been? Are they going back and forth to the same place? Is that their way to figure out how to traverse these, ridges and hollers and things like that? I mean, that's a really good question, because I honestly don't know the answer to. I mean, I know a rub is, a deer puts his antlers to a tree to get the velvet off, number one. Number two, I do know that they rub their face glands on the tree, so it has scent on it as well. So I would assume that it's marking territory or something of that nature, as well as maybe using a trail or whatnot. But I do know that a very big buck will do the smaller scrapes, though. And sometimes a big buck will rub a small tree, and sometimes they rub a real big tree too. It just depends on what part of the country you're in.
Yeah, so as far as my knowledge of rubs is obviously it's the antler rubbing on saplings, smaller trees, brush, whatever. Um, and then they put that forehead gland on there, and it's really just making their presence known, like, hey man, I'm here too. And then what that does is establishing the pecking order for when the breeding season at its peak is here. We can know who the big dog is. So as far as I know, that's what a rub is to me, is really just letting them know that, hey, I'm here, and I'm I'm gonna be fighting for the top of this pecking order because I want all the does. So I think that's what a deer's doing whenever it's making a rub.
I'm about to look it up. I'm Googling it right now.
Well, while you're doing that, the reason I wanted to start with talking about scrapes and rubs, because I'm imagining someone brand new, and this is their first rut, and it's like, man, what are the few things I need to look for? Well, a scrape and a rub. If you can find one of them, that's probably a pretty good place to start to hunt the rut.
So that is very true. You have a solid point there. So defined, a rub is rubbing the tree, whatever, or fence post or anything that they're rubbing and putting their forehead gland on. However, it is also a lot like a scrape where they put the scent on it and a visual
Mm-hmm.
marker to speak to other deer. Essentially, it's what they're doing is
Yeah,
communication.
exactly.
That
Yep.
is another form
Yeah,
of
they're just making.
communication. Yeah, which is exactly
Yep.
what you said in the beginning. So that's it. And I guess I was kind of right too, but I just wasn't sure, man. I've never
Oh
really
yeah.
deep dove into that. I mean, never really thought a whole lot about what is a rub because I know they don't come back to that rub again that same year and rub that same tree again, right? But they
Mm-mm.
will come back to that scrape and freshen it up a
Mm-mm.
lot.
Well, and there's a big reason why they come to the scrape and not so much come back to the rub per se, is because other deer will put their scent on that scrape. Most other deer don't put their scent on the rub. So that's why they come back and check it. And bucks more specifically are checking to see, okay, has another big buck been on my territory? Because this is mine. I made this. No one else is supposed to be here but me. And also, to your point earlier, are checking. Hey, has a lady been here? I mean, is someone ready
Yeah,
to rock and roll yet? Because I've been ready, man. I'm just waiting for one of these women to tell me they're ready, and it's on.
yeah, no doubt, man. Wouldn't that be awful? One time a year.
I mean, dude, I'd need to listen. I'd be running around the forest mad too.
I'd be fighting everybody.
Oh, buddy, I'd be scraping and pissing and everything.
I would be too, man. Scraping,
It'd be
rubbing. I'd
oh
be bellowing, roaring, whatever, grunting, all
no,
over the
buddy.
place, man. I'd be the
Yeah,
first one to get shot.
it'd be. Oh, oh yeah, me too. If one dude makes a call to me, I'm coming running. I'm like, "What's up, lady?"
What's
I'm
up,
like,
girl?
"Where are you?"
Where
Pow!
you
Oh
at?
god.
Boom, done. Yep, that would be me
Oh
too.
man. Oh my
Oh
goodness, I
man,
know.
thank the Lord for our
So
wives.
let's break this down a little bit.
Yeah.
Everybody, whenever you say the rut to a deer hunter, all they think about is the chasing of a doe by a buck, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
all usually anyone thinks about. But there's stages to this. So there's obviously the pre-rut, right? So but before the rut gets here, and then you can kind of see the woods starting to ramp up. There's some seeking going on. And then there's the peak, which is the chasing phase, which is where whenever you see that deer just running by you 100 miles an hour, you can holler at it. You can do everything that you're not supposed to do as a deer hunter, and that deer doesn't care, right? So there's that. And then there's the post rut when things start to kind of wind down. Maybe some deer are still chasing, but for the most part, it's over. And then once in a while, there's a potential for what some call the second rut. It's not very common, but it's not 0% chance either. So that's kind of the breakdown of it, and I kind of just want to go through each of those. So um, and times that, we've been in the woods and seen it. So, like the pre-rut, for the state of Tennessee, okay, I would say generally is anytime before, I would say, November 1st, and then in the seeking phase, you're probably the very beginning of November, and then once you get into like, 10th to the 14th, somewhere in there, I'd say chasing starts. Chasing lasts about a few days, week tops if you're lucky. I mean, it's not like the peak of it lasts forever, and then after that, it's obviously the post rut. So, uh, now that's here in Tennessee. I also want people to know that every state's different. I mean, tell us about deer hunting the rut in Alabama. What's that like?
Man, deer hunting the rut in Alabama really isn't till the end of season, more January through the first week of February, depending on where you're at in the state of Alabama. The one thing I've noticed in the seeking phase, sometimes what I've seen is a lot of younger bucks, like your spikes and
Mm-hmm.
2 year olds running around just because they're excited, and the big bucks are hanging back in the cut just waiting because they know
Yeah.
that it's not time
Yep.
yet. But I mean, I guess they know. But I've noticed that on the seeking phases, that majority of the bucks you see are younger deer. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen every time, because there's a really great chance that a big buck's going to walk out and it'd be awesome, But I think that
Mm-hmm.
majority of the deer in that seeking phase are the younger bucks.
I totally agree, and this goes back to the point of the scrapes. This is why I wanted to bring it up. Uh, During the seeking phase, those younger deer are getting more ramped up and heated, and they're going to go visit those scrapes.
Yeah, and
I
one
mean,
thing that they'll do too is they'll have a community scrape to start with, where all the
mm,
bugs try to go and take a whiz in there. But majority of the time, the closer it gets, the more territorial those bucks are going to get. So they're going to be setting their boundaries for
mhm.
that. It's like, hey, this is my piece. Get off. Get out of here. I'll fight you. If you come across
Oh
this
yeah,
scrape line, we're fighting. And,
yep.
man, I just think that's a real special time of the year, because it really gives you the opportunity to see what your farm can hold, what it does hold, and you're not going to necessarily get just all the deer off your farm. There's a lot of deer that are going to move in from up to 3 miles. I mean, I'm pretty sure that a buck will travel up to 3 miles during the rut for breeding.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a whole different ball game, man. I mean, you may have a deer come by you that you've never seen on camera,
Mm-hmm.
you've never seen in person, and I think that's what makes hunting the rut so special, is just the unpredictability of it, and just not knowing when and if that deer's going to come out. And because, man, when you're in there, it could be dead and you can't hear a cricket, and then a light switch just flips and we're on.
Well, I
And
mean,
buddy, we
yeah,
we've been there.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's just like our Georgia hunt that we did together. The first day we didn't see
Mm,
a whole lot of movement. I mean, we saw a bunch of deer, but
mm.
that's just pretty par for the course for South Georgia. But the next morning, though, if you recall, it was a light switch, and there were bucks everywhere, everywhere running. We passed on a really nice 6 point that we probably should have killed. We had that 1 8 point that come blistering past us chasing that doe that we couldn't even stop. I was like, hey, hey, and it wouldn't stop. He was just, he was out of there.
Nah, that
And
deer did not care at all.
no, and that big buck that we ended up shooting, dude, we were just glassing, with the binoculars looking through, because it was the way this stand is seated, it's on a flat, kind of a swamp bottom with a bunch of oak trees that flood sometimes. And then there is a swamp in front of it, and then it goes to a pine thicket. And I mean, it is thick. Woo, it's thick in there. But we
Hmm.
were glassing, and that buck was cruising the edge of that pine thicket, And we just so happened to spot him. It's like, oh, hey, man, look, there's a shooter right there. Let's try to grunt him over here. Hit the grunt call, and I am by no means, a grunter. I just do it. I'm like, all right, cool. This sounds cool. Whatever. I don't know how to do all that. I'm a duck hunter, man. I'm a duck caller, not a buck caller. I don't do all that mess. But, John's really good at it, and he's really good at turkey calling too. So he was giving me tips up there while we were going through that. Because, man, I ain't ever used no grunt call. He's like, man, you got to just do it like this. I was like, all right, cool. And I did.
Yeah.
And then here he comes. Jumped the fence. We shot him at, 15, 20 yards? I mean, it was something special because, brother, he was a 6-year-old whitetail. I mean, he was a very, very, very mature deer. And, that just goes to show that during that time of the year, you put a dominant buck grunt in, and he's going to turn, and he's at least going to check you out. At least try to see what's going on with that. But while we're talking about grunts, let's dive into our next section of deer calls and what we found that's effective during the rut.
Yeah. So I've got a few examples here. The first one's the most basic. Anybody can use this call. So what it is a doe estrus bleat can. Okay.
Hot doe.
And it does, the old hot doe can here. All it does is exactly what I just said. It makes a bleat of a doe that is an estrus. What is estrus? Estrus is when a doe's in heat, just like when your female dog gets in heat. Same concept, same exact thing I'm talking about. So this is what it sounds like. All you do is you tip the can and then flip it back over. It's going to sound like this. And that's it. Just. And now, what is that saying? Okay. What is that deer doing? That deer is telling all the other deer that, hey, I'm an estrus. I'm ready. Like, I'm kind of I'm over here. Whenever you're ready, I'm ready. Okay, cool. Then, sticking on the does here for a second, there's something called a breeding bellow call. And that's like an estrus bleat. Yeah, it's not common. People don't, I don't want to say it's not common. It's deer do it all the time during this time of the year. It's not a very common thing through deer hunters. But what is it? It is a estrus bleat with a kick. Okay? Sounds like this. And now what is that deer saying? That deer is going, hey, I'm ready, and I'm ready right now. I ain't playing no games. I ain't got time. We ain't going to dinner first. Nothing. Now. That's what that deer's saying.
Well, there's probably, if they're doing that, there's probably 4 or 5 bucks pretty close by that are fighting, duking it out to figure out who's the dominant buck. And I have one that's my favorite. Let me get this example.
All right, let's do it.
The rattling horns. That resembles a buck fighting. Now, am I the best at that? No, but it's a lot of fun to do that. Just watch out. You may pinch your thumb or your fingers, whatever. But that is a good way to emulate 2 bucks going at it. And it really piques the interest of other bucks that are close by. It's like, oh, hey, if they're fighting over there, then there may be a doe in heat over there too. We need to go check that out and get in on that action, because if these bucks are inferior to me, I can whip both of them, and then I can win. Hey, that's how it works, man.
Now, yeah. So whenever you do the rattling horn and you put in a grunt and maybe a snort wheeze, man, now there's always the other side of the coin. So you may push a little deer out that, may be a good deer antler-wise, but he's not the big buck. He's not the dominant buck. So If it's the dominant buck, he's gonna come in there, man. He's gonna be like, "What are y'all doing in my neck of the woods, pal? This ain't cool."
Mm-hmm.
So you can use that rattling. You can integrate a buck grunt and a snort wheeze in that. I'll demonstrate those. The buck grunt, easy call. You literally just get a grunt call and you just push air through it. It's not difficult. That's it. Now you can do different tones. You can go longer, louder, whatever you want to do. And then there's another one that I've had work. I've had all these calls work, but this one I was impressed that it worked. I'll tell the story really fast. Had a group of deer come in this field. Me and my dad were hunting, and man, they would just stay in this far corner, went into the tall grass and just disappeared. And I was like, where the heck are these deer? And I grunted and I did this and that because I saw a buck in the group and nothing was working. And I'm like, man, I said, well, Dad, before we give up here, I've got one more call to try. And it was this call right here. It's called a snort wheeze. And it sounds like this. And buddy, that is saying like, hey, I'm ready to fight. And not only am I ready, I know I'm going to whoop you. It ain't even going to be close. And when you tell an alpha male deer that, he does not like it. And he comes over there and checks it out. So I did that to this deer. This deer came on a string from like 250 yards to 30 and finally turned broadside, shot the deer. The rest is history.
Like,
So that's it, man. I mean, I hammered that deer. It didn't make it out of the field. And so to say all that, those are the four most common and noteworthy calls to have in your deer arsenal. I would start with the estrus bleat. I have a nice deer on the wall that came from that, and then I would go to a buck grunt. And if you have at least those two, then eventually integrate the other two, and that's a great place to start. So find a rub and a scrape, do a bleat call and a grunt call, and you're probably gonna have some luck during the rut.
yeah, no, I agree with that 100%, man. And you know, deer are vocal animals. You know, it's just you have to kind
Yeah,
of understand what they're doing, what they're saying, and why they're doing this at certain times of year. Because if you go out and you're grunting in August in velvet season, they're going to be like, "What?"
like dude,
Or
what are you
snort
doing?
wheezing or whatever. You know, I mean, they're not snort wheezing in August; they're still in velvet. You know, um, now that doe bleat does work in August. It'll bring an old early season. It'll bring a doe in real quick, and sometimes a buck too, because the buck will
Mm-hmm.
sometimes take up for a youngin, but it will bring a doe in pretty quick if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah,
But so I have a question for you, John.
sure.
Do you shoot does during the rut or after? And why? Why is that? What is your stance on that? I know what my stance is, and I know what my answer is, but I want to hear what you think about that.
So, no is the short answer. But why? So, just like we've talked about, the rut is when you know bucks are chasing does, bucks are seeking does. So, to me, my goal is to shoot a good buck during the rut, and does are a phenomenal tool to shoot those nice big bucks. So I don't want to shoot a doe in heat that could potentially bring in a really nice deer. And then as far as after the rut goes, what I don't want to do is shoot a doe that potentially is carrying my next big buck. So same concept with late season like turkeys with bearded hen. I don't want to do that because it could be carrying my next long beard. Same thing here. I don't want to shoot a doe in, after Christmas because Lord knows what could be in it. I mean, and the doe could not be pregnant, right? But
Yeah.
I'm not going to have time to examine. I mean, so I just don't take that chance. And I try to shoot all my does in October, and maybe one before the rut really starts. And but that's about it there. What's
Yeah.
your stance?
Man, I agree with you 110%. Like, I do not shoot does once the rut starts. I'm just not going to do it because I want all the breeding stock I can possibly have during that time. And if you shoot them afterwards, like you said, it could have your next big buck in the chamber, in the cooker, but you just don't know it because you're not going to know it until later in the spring.
Yep.
You're not going to be able to see that at all until later on. Um, and I think you're doing yourself a disservice by shooting those late after the rut. And I've
Mhm.
always had the philosophy of you shoot the does during bow season, and then when gun season starts, you quit shooting does. That's just kind of been my thing because they're not breeding, they're not bred, they are just surviving and living. That's all they're doing at that time. And I just don't think it's necessary to shoot them outside of gun season. But now that's coming from a herd management stance. Now some places, are overrun with does, and you can shoot 10,000 of them and it doesn't
Right.
matter. You know, Specifically in South Georgia, there are so many deer on some of those farms that it is unbelievable the amount of does to bucks. And that's just, in that circumstance, you want to shoot more does
Mhm.
and try to, cut back on that population gap a little bit, but you probably never will. But you can
Yes.
sure enough give it a good effort.
Yes. Nothing is absolute, right? There's always going to be a circumstance or a situation where I may shoot a doe during this time of year. As a matter of fact, I did. Uh, one of my best friends from college and soon to be groomsman, Caleb McAfee. We actually doubled on does last year on his farm for that very reason. Uh, he had a lot more does than bucks, and he invited me out there because he wanted to get on some doe patrol. And I mean, hey man, if you're gonna invite me out to shoot a deer, I'm not gonna say no. So I came out there and
Yeah.
we got it done. But
Yeah, man, I love shooting does. They eat real good. But I will say
oh
too
yeah,
that the hide also makes a great rug because you're not trying to shoulder mount it and just get half the hide. But I
mm-hmm.
will say too, to that point, different states do have different deer densities. So the management plan
Sure,
changes per state on how many does you need to kill, when you need to kill them, and things of that nature. There's some places that they're overrun, like Texas, man. There are some places in Texas that the doe to buck ratio is ridiculous. And same with South Georgia, same with South Alabama. And there's pockets all around the country. Dude, there's pockets in Kentucky. There are so many does that it is absolutely ridiculous the amount of does per buck.
mm-hmm.
So what that does is
Absolutely,
that reduces the chance of you seeing a buck because he's got all these does hanging around everywhere. He doesn't have to go far. They don't have to leave far. They
right.
don't have to go seeking or searching for a doe. They're just there. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of them. So my advice would be if you have that problem, hammer down from the opening of bow season till gun season starts. And if they're in rut, great. You know, don't shoot as many does. I mean, try to curve it. But if you're really trying to manage the population, I think sometimes you kind of have to waver that a little bit. So you can effectively control or help the population be at a healthy level instead of it being an overpopulation and they become, stressed for food, stressed for a little bit of everything. Because the more mouse you have to
Mm-hmm.
feed, obviously, there's a lot more that has to go into that. So there's definitely a good balance there that you have to follow.
Absolutely, and And that's what it's all about, is just managing the herd. And, for my farm, I'm not going to shoot that doe. And maybe in South Georgia on some people's farms, it is that way. And it's, situations are situational, and you just got to
Mm-hmm.
take it as is. I will say another reason that you may not want to shoot that doe, that a lot of people may not realize, is the communication factor. And what am I trying to say is the nonverbal cues. Like, if you just sit there and you just watch this doe, it's going to tell you if she's an estrus or not. And how you may ask, how does a doe tell you non-verbally? Well, for one, most of the times deer's tails are laying flat, like right up against them. And then, if they're in danger, their tail is up, and then they throw up the white flag and, saying everybody bounce. But if they're in estrus, most times it'll be flat. And that's them telling all the other deer around them, like, I'm ready. I'm in estrus. So there's that. And then a deer likes to squat a lot, and AKA it's peeing a lot. It's putting out scent. Like, your deer will tell you what's going on if you just let them, instead of just letting the deer come in and you don't give it 3 seconds and you blast this doe. I mean, and all that's fine and dandy, but maybe give it 10 minutes and let that deer talk to you. You know what I mean? And tell you what's going on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, man. Because if you do have that hot doe in front of you, there's a good chance there's a buck real close by on
Right.
its way.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really not any
And
other way to look at that. But if you really study the deer and you learn, okay, this doe is in heat now. She's being chased by all the little bucks, and the big bucks are
mhm,
fighting in the background or whatever. But you can also tell when they're going into rut because those little bucks will start bumping them, trying to chase them everywhere. So that's one thing to watch out for. But like you're saying, to your point, if you notice a doe is doing that kind of stuff, that's when you're going to be more likely to kill the nice buck.
yes. And you may also have more luck calling during that time, because just like you were saying earlier, right? If a estrus bleat, now we can deep dive in another episode of different bleats and different grunts. That's a whole nother conversation. But for an estrus bleat, they're not doing that in July.
No.
They're doing that in November. So,
Yes.
but if you do an estrus bleat and no deer is an estrus, the buck's gonna be like, I don't believe it. I'm not going over there. But if you just saw a doe tell you that it's an estrus, and it may walk away or whatever, and then you do an estrus bleat, that buck will be like, I saw Sally the other day with her tail even. I bet you that's
Mm-hmm.
her over there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go see what's up.
I
And you
mean,
got a
dude.
better chance.
Well, the thing of it is that deer communicate. That's the bottom line. Is they're going to communicate. They have the
Yeah.
scent glands. They
Yep.
have the bleats, the grunts, the snort wheezes, all that stuff. That is all communication, and we have to pay attention to what that communication is and what time of the year it is to be more successful in the woods. That's just, I mean, you have touched on a lot of solid topics there, and it really boils down to communication. That's just what it is.
Yep.
As the deer are communicating
Yep.
with each other, letting the other deer know, hey, I'm in heat, ready to breed, come on, bucks, or they're like, don't touch me, back away.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and like
Exactly.
the rattling of the horns, man, those bucks. I mean, I didn't do a really good job of demonstrating what it is, but dude, it's violent. It can be really, really violent. And it's not
Yeah,
quiet,
man.
it's not soft. Now, sometimes they'll get locked and, it'll be a little click clack, but when they hit each other, buddy, they hit. I mean, it's like two linemen hitting. You got to think about that. It's
Hmm.
200 plus pound deer hitting each other face to face, fighting to the death sometimes. Literally, I've seen deer that's gotten locked up and, the other one's toting around the loser's head. I mean, they're still
Yeah,
locked together in their antlers, and nature's brutal, man. It really is. It is a brutal
it's rough
place,
out
but
there.
it is very rough out there. But I will say though that I think that you're hit the nail on the head when you talked about the communication, the grunting, and all that stuff. I think that is a great way to expand your ability to harvest more deer during the rut is to utilize those techniques.
I totally agree. And I just hope that this episode can help somebody, and hopefully that you can tag yourself a nice buck this year during the rut. And Ben, if there's anything else you want to add it. But I think I've about told everything I wanted to say here.
Yeah, man. Well, we do have the rut coming in for us because we have muzzleloader
Mm-hmm.
next weekend. You got married
Yep.
this weekend, or you're getting married this weekend. So I will see you tomorrow. Anyway,
Yeah,
folks,
it's gonna be awesome.
yeah, it is. We appreciate y'all tuning in, listening to what we're doing. Thank y'all for that. And we are signing off this episode. Redneck out.
See y'all later. Make sure to check out the YouTube Rooted Podcast, Rooted Television. Check us out. See ya.